Hey, guys.
Yeah.
I could go back and forth and all day long.
So I have a question. I want to understand what gets in the way of this. Is it a talent philosophy? Is it technology? Or is it resources? Because this is possible.
Or
at
all
least
three.
in terms, right, at least in terms of the response capability. It doesn't have to be a phone call, but there's something between an auto response, which candidates absolutely know, nobody looked at it, and a phone call. So just curious in terms of either people in the audience or you guys in terms of what you're seeing that is preventing us from moving forward. And I'm mostly focused on the responsiveness more so than maybe transparency to comp.
Who wants? I have three things that I think get in the way, but I don't want to. One of them is right now the recession issue. We're being asked to do more with the same. So that's just one issue, and that fundamentally it's driving a lot of frustration on the part of recruiting leaders. They need to get over that, and they need to find real solutions to that so they can get back to some of those kinds of issues. Second piece for me is this whole issue about how the hiring manager is counseled and engaged by staffing, and that fundamentally they have a perception that they in fact know. They may not know how to describe it, but they know it when they see it. And so from their perspective, how they treat candidates, we need to take more accountability in terms of that and be involved in pushing back. I look at this issue of, hiring managers who are constantly looking out there at a line of candidates and kind of looking for people who kind of look a lot like themselves without really engaging what's going to be important in the business. I think that the recruiters themselves are being pushed to deal with reaction to technology rather than driving technology. And so fundamentally, I think there's some key issues about whether they're trying to put bodies in seats in order to reduce their time to fill, et cetera, because they're being measured against that. And there are other issues there, and we need a better balance of that. And finally, we don't have enough job seekers who just get ticked off and stop the process and say, you know something, I don't like the way you're treating me, and I am not going to come to your company, and I'm going to badmouth your company.
And
So
they might be thinking that.
a couple things. I mean, you just touched on it. Job seekers have very little leverage in this game, particularly now in this market. Maybe the best of the best have leverage because they're a hot commodity, but most don't. Most can't influence the process directly. I think it's easy to hide behind technology. It's easy to say volume. It's easy to do all those, or to find all of those excuses. I think it is a fundamental flaw in how we recruit, which is based more on who we need to hire tomorrow as opposed to who we need to hire 3 months from now or a year from now. If we could figure out a way to focus on that stuff, we could give those people the experience that they really, really deserve, and you give everybody else a different experience, but you allocate your resources.
So you'd be differentiating the kinds of experience. The quality of it would be high in each case, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, but at two different levels.
But that the pipeline issue would be a little bit different in how I'd work that out versus those things that are coming today.
Much more hands-on, much more face-to-face, much more touchy-feely.
So the Bill of Rights, if we got down to what we're talking about, the Bill of Rights that you would write or describe might be different for different streams, if you will.
I think so.
Okay.
I agree with Charlie. I think that it's short-term versus long-term. What are the pros and cons? What are the negative repercussions? The answer to Susan's question is, where's the internal incentive? What's driving it? Now we're in the world where a customer, right? It's the reflection on the customer, reflection on the brand. I think we need to get to the religion on this to understand the long-term implications of not being responsive to candidates. And we need to build internally. This doesn't get to the Bill of Rights, but we need to find incentive internally to be more responsive to candidates, because the long-term effects, if we don't,
what I hear you saying is we really need to measure the fact that it does have all the things that we're saying it does have as an impact on us, that they stop becoming our customers, that they badmouth us to other people who could become customers, and so on. But I see a lot of people saying it. I don't see a lot of people measuring the truth of that in their business. So how many people who are ticked off at Starbucks stop buying Starbucks, or any other of the retail issues? Those would be the easier ones to deal with. I don't see enough data as it relates to that.
I think it goes, well, and I also think, I mean, it goes back to that whole point about
Your buddy is taking your
resource restrictions. He's used to it.
You're in professional
He's
mode.
used to
He's
it.
in anarchist mode.
That wasn't on camera.
We're in for an ass whooping, so I figure I'm going to put that off for a second. So,
Postpone the pain.
but I think the resource issue can't be ignored, because I think what happens is your point is exactly right. But in a lot of the talent, or the talent acquisition, roles I've been in, it was about what the business was saying was, I want to see that the seats are filled tomorrow.
Sure.
And if I have to trade off something I'm going to do, or energy or effort or resource to fill that seat tomorrow, to make sure the people we don't hire feel better about themselves and about the process, most of the people that I've had giving me my marching orders were saying, fill the spot. And so when I'm making that decision, you have to, how do you do both? And I think that's where we get hung up, is it's like, if I'm going to have to give up on one, we're going to do our best over here, but I'm going to make sure the people we do hire have a good experience.
Right.
And I think that's the trade-off we're making. And it's I don't know, I'm not exactly sure how we get out of that.
Well, and do we get hang on, I don't want you to come up here and get all crazy, but do we get a valid response back, or do we even search for one across the board from candidates that we do hire, let alone those that we
companies
don't?
do not measure anything about their candidates from the
And
point
what are
at
you
which
gonna say?
they press that button that says, I'm applying. So only about 5% do that. About 30 or 40% start doing surveys and or focus groups of folks who are the finalists, but that's a small percentage of the total candidates that we're talking about.
And I think, doesn't a Bill of Rights have to be about the underlying principles that are informing the relationship? And I think that's something that can be customized to organizations, but doesn't have to be about the principles rather than things that we're going to do, like turn on the auto update. I mean, I think that's kind of the core of this problem, this disconnect. I heard a phrase earlier that always chaps my ass, and it's, we need to treat candidates the way that we would want to be treated. And I think that's absolute horseshit, and that's part of the problem. That's what leads us to start treating people like objects. I think we need to do a better job. It's on us, and it's not easy, and it's not simple, and it takes time, but it's on us to find a way to treat candidates the way they want to be treated.
Agreed.
And so there has to be principles in place like choice. And some of the things that were mentioned, authenticity, accessibility, some of those things, some of those underlying principles to do that. I think that we oftentimes talk about tools or tactics and not those underlying principles. One more thing I will add is, I will push back also on this a little bit. I think realistic is very overrated. And I think going back to our initial conversations this morning, we can't use that as an excuse anymore. We have to start making big promises and taking big actions. Realistic is overrated, and we use it too often to get out of the way of doing things that match up with who we claim to be.
I love what you're saying. I have one issue for me when you're talking about tactics versus the principles. You have to have both.
Yeah.
If you have principles and you don't know how to make them real, you don't know how, you can't describe what that means, fundamentally you've disconnected from the principle. So, and I do agree that it's not going to come from me. The decision is going to be made by the job seeker who's going to tell you that.
Who's looked for a job in their life in this audience? How do you want to be treated? Right?
Right.
Well,
let's start there.
I think there's some things that we can do, and I don't want to say technology for the sake of technology, but I think that there are some things that we can do today and implement into our existing candidate, the application process and experience, that could allow for them to customize their experience. And from those requests, from those opt-ins, from those messages, from that input, we get some measurement, right? We get an idea of where our candidate body, how they want to be treated. I mean, maybe it would shock the hell of us to find out that 90% of the people don't want an auto response, and that they only expect a monthly update. Or maybe we'd be surprised to find out only 10% literally want a phone call from somebody to say thanks for applying.
Or if you do have an auto response, just checking to see if in fact it's happening. Because I would maintain that half of the auto responses we think are happening, in fact, break down somewhere between us saying that it exists and them getting it.
Well, and even so if you had an auto response on today, who's got an auto response on there? It's turned on today. Okay, so I'm going to throw this out since we're
So how do you know it actually went out?
Right.
Yeah, or got there, right? It's the whole, well, okay, different, all right. But anyway, in your auto response, how out of the question would it be to serve back a link that is a survey to how they'd like the rest of their candidate experience to go?
Great idea.
I mean, is that so crazy? I mean, we say, hey, we're glad that you applied. No, really, we are. But here's a link where we want you to tell us how you'd like the rest of this adventure to go.
Well,
yeah, or even, yes, uncover
you
their
open yourself up
expectations.
there, right?
To what?
To meeting expectations.
Shouldn't we?
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
Got to know
What degree
they are
should,
first.
well, yeah. I mean, we're looking for, you got a measurement out front, right? And then you have to set those expectations.
I think it's a great idea, Chris. You might do that with candidates at certain points in the development cycle. So it's got to be, i.e., if there's a conversation that was held, or i.e., if they come in for a first interview. So,
Well, I think it's how we package it and ultimately how we deliver it.
Maybe
But the
that's
goal
how you-
being a first step to pulling it.
I love that idea, and I mean that could be one of the takeaways from this event is, somebody, I don't know who that is, I'm not volunteering, but writes that survey, and then a bunch of us raise our hand and say we're going to put this in for 3 months and see what it comes back across, see what everybody gets, because it would be interesting. I mean, if nothing else, it would be interesting to know how universal is the expectation, because maybe it is, maybe I'm watching, maybe it's more consistent.
Well, maybe it gets bigger. Maybe it drives how you change the entire candidate experience on your website. Maybe it helps you reassign funds that you were going to put toward marketing, or that you finally got approved for marketing and you realize need to go more toward process or more towards engagement, or God forbid, more towards headcount. Right. That somebody could actually reach out and engage these candidates the way they expect to be engaged.
I think it's an interesting idea. I think we try to solve the world's problems with surveys sometimes. So surveys, death by survey. I want to just say, touch on something that Joe said, which I think is really important, that this tactical versus principle. We do talk a lot about the experience in terms of what happens when they push a button, what happens when they submit something. We don't talk a lot about it in terms of what information do we give them, right? So we ask for a lot of information from them. We spend a lot of time assessing their fit for a role. We don't give them information to assess their fit for the company. And that, for me, is a real big miss. It goes beyond the process. It goes beyond the system. It goes to creating kind of a collaborative relationship in the whole hiring game. It's a two-way street.
So you're talking content of job or content of culture?
Of the culture of the company, and stuff that's substantive, not just what happens when you disagree with somebody in this company. It's those kinds of things.
If I'm a female engineer, and I know 17% of the practicing engineers are female, I'm coming to your company, I'm looking at your company, but you know something, if this is an issue for me, I'm interested in where that information lies in your organization. I want to know when I come to those career pages, not just the culture issue. I want to see some specificity about what kinds of things you may be doing with women in engineering in terms of either moving them around or moving them up within an organization, if that's of interest to me. But you don't know that unless you know that this is a critical area.
Yeah.
Right? You've convinced them that the culture is the right culture, but the question is it happening in terms of the details?
So, Gerry,
there's data that I want, and I think key companies do want